I'm going to take roughly 10 minutes to quickly do a kind of a quick introduction on the Teams Toolkit V2 and concentrating on the SharePoint Framework side of the house. So let's talk about this one. Teams Toolkit version 2 is in preview status, and it actually supports creation of the UX layer, especially tabs using SharePoint Framework. Now, we are working together with Teams Engineering and Visual Studio developer division with the tools people to make this experience more optimal. So right now, what you're seeing today is quite limited, but I also want to get the feedback in the chat on what you would like to see and how things are looking, and hopefully we'll get people interested on testing this as well. So you can actually report ideas and input and feedback for the Visual Studio organization as well. Now, as before we go to the actual demo and how it actually works, I just briefly going to take 2 minutes to talk about the opportunity and why we are doing this. So, of course, we have 145 million daily active users in the Microsoft Teams. We have more than 200 million monthly active users in SharePoint, and we have more than tens of millions of monthly active users in SharePoint using SharePoint Framework. So there's tens of millions of people who are using already SPFx SharePoint Framework components in SharePoint. So, and people are writing tens of thousands of components in every single month. So we're seeing a massive usage on SharePoint Framework. And so people want to write components using SharePoint Framework. So why wouldn't we then extend the SharePoint Framework to be the extensibility model for Microsoft Teams? As you saw within the previous demos and during the community demos, there are a lot of capabilities what you can build already with SPFx. And now we're improving that with the Teams Toolkit V2 and looking into further improvements in the future as well. Now, just a quick recap on the SharePoint Framework. Of course, a lot of the people in this call are familiar with this one, but it is really the easiest way to build your enterprise solutions in Microsoft 365. It has automatic single sign-on, automatic hosting. You don't have to worry about anything. The hosting is done by SharePoint, even though you would be actually using it in Microsoft Teams or in Microsoft Viva. It has a consistent dev experience, and it's an industry standard tooling. It's not about SharePoint isms. You don't need to understand feature framework or XMLs or JSONs or whatever. It's just web stack development, TypeScript and Node. That's why it has been so popular. And what we're doing right now is that we are further extending SharePoint Framework to have additional shapes. So you've seen today the card shape, which is the adaptive card, dynamic adaptive card shape, and there's additional shapes available as well for Microsoft Teams and then for the SharePoint. Now, the Teams Toolkit V2 will have a native SharePoint Framework integration support, and the team is looking a lot of feedback from the SharePoint developers on what would be actually needed. And even though maybe they can't address that feedback within the version 2, they might address that feedback in the version 2.1, 2.2 to version 3, and so on. But basically what that means is that you can install the Microsoft Teams Toolkit, and you can choose to use SharePoint Framework as the UX layer to implement your user interface for Microsoft Teams. Now, this is slightly different experience, and I'm going to show that in a second, than using just the SharePoint Framework Yeoman Generator. And we're working with the Visual Studio team to get it more integrated and all of that. You are using exactly the same tooling. You're still using Gulp, you're still using Node.js and all of them. But the experience is a bit different because we are creating the project from a different, let's say, location. Let's actually move in to have a quick look on how this actually works in practice. First of all, where can you actually get it? So you can find it from the Visual Studio Marketplace. Typically, you wouldn't actually come to this page through a browser. You would come to this page using the extension view in the Visual Studio Code, but I'm just going to call this out just in case in here. And if you would have time, and that would be highly requested, we would love to get more, let's say, ideas and issues and reports in this GitHub repo. So this is the location where we would like to get suggestions, ideas, and feature requests related on SharePoint Framework in the Microsoft Teams Toolkit version 2.0. And maybe maybe you think that, hey, they should know already, so I'm not going to actually suggest X and Y and Z. Please do. It might be that the person who is actually focusing on addressing the issue list is not aware of something what we discussed it within the community goal. So please let people know what is needed. Because everything what we do in Microsoft is for your benefit. So we want our tooling to be the best tooling in the world for you. So rather, we don't want to dictate you to use bad tooling. We want to create the best possible tooling. So you choose to use that tool because it helps you. Okay. Now, how do we actually get this installed? It's quite simply. Let me go to Visual Studio Code. In my extensions, I already installed that. So if I go to the Teams or find the Teams in the extensions in the Visual Studio Code, VS Code, you can actually find it. This is basically the same, pretty much the same information which is in the marketplace listing, and you can just enable that to be available in the computer. When that has been done, the latest version, by the way, at the time is 2.2, still in preview. You'll actually get this Teams Toolkit available in the left menu. You can actually configure that to be optionally available, all of that like normally in Visual Studio Code. And then from here, we provide additional guidance, additional starting points. So first of all, I've already signed into the Azure and also already signed into my dev tenant or test tenant. So I'm not going to sign in, but it's basically asking you to sign into those environments so it can perform automatic operations, registrations, deployments to make your life as easy as possible. So really, really cool stuff as well. And then you can easily access documentation, guidance, all of that from here as well. So it's kind of making it really easy for you to get started and to creating the project. Let's create a new project and see how it actually works in practice. So creating a new project, it's going to ask me in here in the top section. Let's actually zoom in a bit. Here we go. One more. There we go. Create a new Microsoft Teams application or start from a sample. Right now, we do not have SharePoint Framework samples available as a starting point. Should we? Open question. Let us know, and we could actually absolutely include a sample to be available from. We do have a lot of samples, like, we have hundreds and hundreds of samples available for SharePoint Framework. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the Create a New Teams app, and I'm going to choose the tab because that's the most that's the supported SPFx implementation right now in the Teams Toolkit. You can combine SPFx with other options as well, which is kind of cool. So you can have a bot as a simple separate solution under the same solution structure. So you can easily move between the bot and the backend code like Azure Function and the tab within the solution structure. So I'm going to choose the tab. I'm going to choose that the hosting type is SharePoint Framework. Technically, hosting is Microsoft 365, not really SharePoint Framework, but anyway, so terminology thing. And because I'm a web stack developer, this is the most natural way for me to implement things because, hey, it's TypeScript, or I can native vanilla TypeScript, or it might be a React. So I can choose whatever the framework in the same way as with SharePoint Framework, Yeoman Generator. I can choose, is it a vanilla JavaScript as vanilla TypeScript, or is it a React TypeScript implementation? So let's see, I will select React. It's going to ask me the name of the things. Let's call this React call demo, so we can identify that. It's going to ask me the description, which the Yeoman generators would be asking as well. It's going to ask me what is the implementation type. Of course, it's TypeScript because why not? And then it's going to ask me where I'm going to actually store the code. Let's select that folder. And it's going to ask me the application name. Let's call this SPFx call demo. So I can actually show one more cool thing. I will press enter, and that basically is provisioning the solution. So now I have the solution structure here. I can basically say that my SPFx solution is included in my solution structure. This is basically a, how would I put it? Teams Toolkit v2 specific structures. Then there's the VS Code information. And then in my solution, currently, I only have a SPFx solution, which only has currently one web part inside of it. And it has some set of default settings available. For example, the supported host has been already by default set to be as Teams tabs and Teams personal application. Now, as part of the guidance, we'll also include the README file where we then provide the minimal path to awesome. So it will make sure that you have the right solutions, right versions, and everything else available. And then you are able to start using the automation which is available in the Teams Toolkit. So let me zoom a bit away. So I will see the Teams Toolkit on the left menu. And I can basically modify the manifest in here. Of course, I can see the manifest. I can get to the manifest. I can modify that. I can modify the images. I can adjust the settings. When that's actually done, I can validate the app manifest file. And it's basically going to do a live validation. And it's going to tell me if something is wrong with the validation and all of that. I can build the Teams package, which is basically going to create the manifest file. And I can provision that to the cloud. And what that means is that it's basically taking that solution package and it's installing that directly to the Teams tenant. So now if I go back in my developer portal in Teams, I can see if we refresh, we should be able to see our React call demo, which was just actually installed to this tenant. So we're using the dev teams Microsoft.com, which is the developer portal for Microsoft Teams, to know all of the solutions which are available. And now I can then, on top of this, right now, if I would install or want to install the solution to the tenant, I would click deploy to the cloud, which unfortunately right now is not doing anything automatically. So, and of course, that would be good feedback. Can we automate this? So the Teams Toolkit automatic deployment is not currently supported for a SharePoint Framework solution. It will basically now install, run the npm install, and then package the SharePoint package and ask you to put it in the tenant app catalog. But after that, you can basically then test the solution directly in Teams and do the thing. So it's a slightly different experience than the Yeoman Generator, but we would love to get more feedback on what's needed, how is it working. Try to hands-on labs and tutorials which are available. Provide feedback us for the Office Dev Teams FX repo, and so we know, and the Visual Studio organization knows how to adjust this experience to better match on your expectation. Really cool stuff for sure. But that's it from my side.